so you know what the book is about. So what it is I wanted to test, like what would you do if, like what the idea of what would you do. So I gave 2 kids in this experiment where everything's perfect, like even numbers, rules for everything. So then by the end, they're given complete power. So then I wanted to see what would a kid about like 14, 15 do when his whole life was just like regulated. He didn't have his own like destiny. He didn't know, he couldn't do things, because of the rules. And I wanted to see what would he do? Would he change this? Would he make a new rule? How would he react? And one of my favorite parts is he gives people names, so they went nameless throughout most of this book. So then by the end of it, he wants people to have their own person, be resembled as their own person. So then he gave them names, So that was actually pretty hard to do too, is go about a book where 90% of it, they don't have a name. Try to just keep with the description and understand you do dialogue, who's speaking, because it doesn't say he said or she said it, or I'm sorry, it doesn't say like the name. It might just say he said or I said. So I gave each character their own personality, so you can understand when you read it, exactly who's talking. Yeah, I had to create my own style of language too, since it was not like I'm talking to you, and it's more definitely a very formal based sense of rule. So it's like, oh, how are you? I'm good, in a very neutral, monotone voice. So that's also why I wanted to give him names, so that, Kyle, that's one of the names. It has a fluctuation with how you say it. So even minor details like that break the idea of very monotonous hi. Hi, Kyle. It just establishes some new language into the society. All right, so I'm going to read you guys a part of the book. So I like this section since it doesn't give away too much information. Location unknown. A man half asleep at his monitors with his coffee in hand was the first to notice the camera. On his screen, he saw the one thing he hoped to never see. Dispute Sector 2. He jolted nearly out of his seat, perplexed by what he was seeing. The camera showed a white car driving with 4 occupants inside. There were 2 kids, a boy and the girl in the back of the car. The man driving seemed upset, but the woman in the seat adjacent to the man had a tiny, very tiny phone in her hand that read DS2. The man got out of his seat and turned to the worker to his right and said, John, come look at this and tell me what you think. I swear, Derek, if you're wrong, you're dead. I'm so tired of your false alarms from Sector 2. The boss isn't happy when you cause chaos for no reason, John said. John was a middle-aged man, about age 40. He had a wife and kids. He was employed by the government of the United States of America. His assignment for the last 15 years was the main cause of conflict for the country. It was, in the eyes of every other country, cruel and inhumane. The one goal: see what a regular human would do in a situation where everything was perfect and they had unlimited power. The whole week was a cycle. The 2 humans under testing were the 2 children, the boy and the girl, known as the pawns. The woman who had the phone was also a regular person who was aware of the experiment. She would actually drive to the headquarters of the project and report her views. The father was not aware, nor were any of the other people. The experiment was known as the King's Pawn. John looked at Derek's screen and froze. He saw the phone in the woman's hand that read DS2. This can't be real. Not here, not now. Why me? Why me? John questioned. This is what I said. What should we do? Derek asked. You need to raise the alarm. Only you have the code, John said. All right. They won't like this because every other alarm has been false, Derek said. If they don't believe us and this whole thing fails, it's on them, not us, John said. Derek agreed. It can't hurt to be on the safe side, Derek replied as he began issuing the alarm. Derek sat back down in his oversized reclining seat and opened a new tab on his automated device that allowed him to type a 25-digit code. He had it committed to memory after the first week. This code set an alarm off at the headquarters, which was less than a mile from the security building in which John and Derek worked every day. Derek picked up the wired phone while he was typing the code and called someone. Sir, yes, it is Derek from S. I have a possible catastrophic situation in Sector 2. A few seconds later, he continued, Yes, sir, I will raise the alarm. Code purple. At 8:27 p.m. on October 21st of 2034, the first code purple was issued for the King's Pawn experiment. No, in the book they start out in like the society, right? So it's the weird words like they're using with each other, weird like standoffish conversations, and then they transition to more like a regular conversation like me and you, and then they're beginning to realize what the real world is. So they just still will describe certain things as what they see it, but it transitions slowly to more like what we understand how to read, like a year straight and over 200 hours. So like I use about 7 hours a week in school on average, just downtime, and then each week I would try to do 5 to 7 hours, and then over time I just compiled it from that. Right. Yeah, that was the hardest thing, though. It was hard because you have to make the decision not to text friends and not to play games and to actually write a book, or you have to get up on a Saturday like miserable, like, oh gosh, I actually have to write a book instead of playing games all day. Yeah, so the idea of the symbolism here is that the idea of like a dome is that like they're kind of like in their own society, so like they're completely just like separated from the outside world. So, and then the king, Susan King is actually the creator and founder of this experiment. So I like to use symbolism with chess. So the two pawns are the two children. So it's the king's pawns, meaning it's the king. She's in control of the pawns and what goes on. No, I was gonna put like right under the title. This is not about chess. Like it's like a quote. I wanted people to understand like when they read it. So the first inclination people have is when I say it's chess. So when I tell them, I said read what it's about, and then they all have the aha moment, like, wow, this is really like not. First of all, they have the idea like, wow, this is a real book that you wrote, yeah. But they also understand that like what it means. I mean, like there's symbolism in the cracking, which I didn't intend when I did it. Like things will crack down, but it's also because it's literally based in like the desert out in Nevada. I chose that because like things don't change out there. You can't do it in the Midwest because climate will change throughout the year. You can't do it out east because climate will change. Way up like west, like the northwest, again climate will change. But like right in like the central like southern area, like Arizona, New Mexico, and Nevada is where like the climate's the same year round. So and I want to keep with that idea of everything's the same every day. So that the sky is usually clear there. There's usually not too many storms. So that when it happens, it's very rare. But it didn't happen. So like the idea with the ending in mind is I wrote this book once through, and I had a different ending, and I ended it right at the ending. And then when I was going back and revising it, I realized if I want to write another one, I opened the door for me allowing to. So I used this ending. I right before we sent it out, like the day before, I redid the whole last 2 chapters because I wanted to possibly write another one. And if I don't, this book still feels complete. But it could be completed definitively if I wrote another one. Perfectionism. So I wanted something perfect. So the idea of like I needed to figure out a way how to see what would happen under perfect rules. I didn't know how I was going to do this. I just went along day by day, and like try. I kind of knew what I wanted to end, sort of, but I just didn't know how to get there. So I was just trying to like what would make sense to get here without making it so like weird and like fictional, and not real. I wanted it to be realistically, like, progressing. I mean, the character, I paid homage to myself. I wrote another book before this. There are only 2 that know, but I never published it. I never intend to. But Jonathan DeVry was a character in that book, and I think Susan was the name of a mother in that book. So I brought back Susan, and I brought back Jonathan DeVry to pay homage to myself.
So yeah, why did you do like that year 2034?
I truly don't know. There's a lot of things like going back that I don't remember like how I got the idea. I do know some of it, like maybe I saw a news story about this, or maybe I was learning about this. That's how certain details like science got in there. But like main detail, I don't know. I think honestly, to be honest, I think I just chose a year in the future, but not too far in the future. I mean, they pretty much already are zombies. They have like no control in their own life. So I mean, that was the hardest part is consistency. Like I did like 2034. So like when I would like be like 5 years later, I'd have to go back. I would literally just go back to because I wouldn't remember. Like so I didn't. Oh, I had 29 pages of notes. So I did. So every time I would, since I wrote in bursts, so I would write maybe 5-10 minutes, and then I would write what I intend to happen next, and I would just keep those. So as I go along, I would be like, oh, I need to go here or want to go here. I mean, I liked like human experimentations, like Stanford Prison Experiments, books like that, But they all had like no rules, so like you could just do whatever, and people abuse the power there. So I figured, well, if there's rules, you're still going to abuse your power eventually. People don't realize that they have all these rules because they just live with it. So just like we live with rules now, you stop at a stop sign, it's ingrained in them. So like when they're told that they don't have to do that, it's hard to figure out what you want to do with that. The ability to change what you've lived your whole life thinking That was definitely hard. Anything you can think of that happens in your life, I had to think of and how to redo it. So for instance, something as simple as a car, since everything's perfect, this was honestly the hardest part. Everything has to be perfect. So like I had to go down to think the details of like a Ford. So like it can't just be a Ford Escape. It has to have perfect cut angles. It has to be like 8 feet. Everything has to be even lengths, even inches. No rounded edges. That was just incredibly difficult. The amount of detail. Right, just trying to think of everything that you can think of, even a phone. You couldn't be rounded. It would have to be square, 4 inches by maybe 2 inches. So that was really difficult. And trying to keep that throughout the book, that was hard to remember all these details. How big was that window? Was it 6 feet or 8 feet? Things like that when you have hundreds upon hundreds. So like for things like the security cameras that I mentioned here, those will come up again. They're very small, maybe about this size, but I had to remember exactly how small. That was also hard. So I would cheat and scroll back down in my notes, just to find it. But that was hard, especially since I did bursts. So over 6 months, if I tried to remember detail I wrote 6 months ago, it's not happening. So trying to be consistent and not suddenly jump from like, oh, they're in a car to, oh, we're here. Just because I forgot where I was 5 minutes ago, which would literally happen. I would be writing, for instance, and I would stop because something would come up, and 5 minutes later I'd come and I go, oh. It ends in the middle of a sentence. Where am I going with this? So that was the hardest challenge, is consistency when writing a book. That's literally perfect. In your head, there were many times where I would, like I said, I'd forget. So like trying to be consistent and knowing where I want to end, and I would like, for certain areas, maybe if they're in Los Angeles, I would try to like look at the map of like the roads in Los Angeles so that I could say, oh, they're on this road. So at this, for instance, there's a hotel that comes up. I think it's a Hilton. I actually Googled like hotels there so I could describe the building, somewhat properly. it has 11 floors, or they have this type of lobby, So I wanted to get that sense of realism in a fiction novel. So I tried to. That was a little difficult. Honestly, I think schools like teach you to read, to look for that, to look for, oh, he punched a window. So does that mean like that there's like a barrier of power there? I don't think they should teach that, honestly. I think that they should teach you how to write a story rather than read, oh, I should be reading this knowing that there's going to be a window. What does that mean? In the long run, it's not really important, but if you can tell a story, I think that's more important, if you tell your story, it's an ability people don't have. I mean, I chose to self-publish it too for that reason. I wanted to just try to give myself a head start because, like, you can be successful having it, but what does it mean if it's just on your phone, right? I can say, well, I have a book, here it is. It doesn't mean the same as if I go, oh, I wrote a book, here you go, would you like to read it? So like there's that type of connection. Yeah, and so my goal is to get a full-time publishing company maybe for the next one, but I wanted to try see how it works.